we have carried out, in our laboratory during couple of years. So as you all know that neurodegenerative diseases are chronic and progressive degenerative diseases which are characterized by slow and chronic loss of specific type of neurons in different brain regions. And there are several factors which plays an important role in neurodegeneration, such as genetic predisposition. Around 10% cases of neurodegenerative diseases are associated with genetics or mutation in particular type of gene. And then environmental toxicants or environmental factors plays a major role. Like 90% cases of neurodegenerative diseases are associated with exposure of different heavy metals, pesticides, and other issues. And then oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, aging, these are also factors which causes neurodegeneration. So neurodegeneration ultimately loss of different types of neurons in the brain. And here those are several different types of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, Huntington disease, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. On the basis of degeneration of specific type of neurons, the neurodegenerative diseases can be categorized into different category. Like in case of Alzheimer's disease, the degeneration of cholinergic neurons takes place, while in case of Parkinson's disease, the degeneration of dopamine producing neurons it takes place. And similarly in Huntington disease also neuron degeneration is there. And in amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, the degeneration of myelin sheath on the neurons it takes place. So ultimately there are several different kind of symptoms which takes place in these neurodegenerative diseases. And my lab basically working on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. So what is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's disease is a chronic degeneration of cholinergic neurons, degeneration of cholinergic neurons into the hippocampus and cortex region. And there is loss of acetylcholine neurotransmitter, and this neurotransmitter regulates the learning and memory in human. When there is loss of acetylcholine, in that condition, there is loss of learning and memory and several other symptoms in Alzheimer's disease patients. And here you can see this is the healthy brain, and in healthy brain we have complete normal architecture of the brain, and the right side you have the Alzheimer's brain, and here you can see the shrinkage of the cortex and hippocampus region, and then degeneration of acetylcholine producing neurons into the hippocampus and cortex region. And in here you can see that there is accumulation of amyloid beta plaques. So amyloid beta is a protein. In normal condition it is responsible for maintaining neurotransmission, but in case of Alzheimer's disease there is mutation of amyloid beta, and it leads to accumulation of amyloid beta in form of plaques, and these plaques they causes the neurodegeneration. Similarly, there is also accumulation of neurofibrillary tangles. So these two pathogenic proteins are involved in Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis. And in Alzheimer's disease brain, you have accumulation of plaque. Similarly, dying neurons, they also have the neurofibrillary tangles. So here also hyperphosphorylation of tau and aggregation of tau protein, it takes place. And most of the drugs which are available in the market, they only provide the symptomatic relief. That means they only give the symptomatic relief to the patient, but they cannot halt or slow down the progression of disease. So this is a major reason that neurodegeneration is continuous process in Alzheimer's disease patient, and we cannot stop that neurodegeneration. So now progress are being made or studies are being done around the world to enhance the brain self-repair mechanism using specific type of factors, and our group is also working on this aspect. So stimulating regeneration of the neurons is a major approach. So this is the healthy neurons, and here you can see the normal axons and the normal cell body of the neuron. These neurons, they connect with each other with synapses, and they do the neurotransmission through different neurotransmitters. And here you can see the synapse, and on the synapse there is a release of neurotransmitter, and then there are several other types of, other than neurons, there are astrocyte and microglia also present in the brain. Astrocytes are the cells which provides the trophic factor support to the neurons, and these are very necessary for normal functioning of the neurons in the brain. And then microglia are the phagocytic cells which scavenge the different debris or different kind of bacteria, viruses in the brain. So this is the amyloid beta and tau which are present into the Alzheimer's disease patient. And then tau hyperphosphorylation and accumulation is a major cause of Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis. Here you can see in blue, this is the tau hyperphosphorylated region. And then amyloid beta accumulation is also here. You can see the brown. So this is the amyloid beta accumulation. And due to these two proteins, the degeneration of cholinergic neurons takes place into the brain. And then excessive accumulation of tau and amyloid beta are the major causal factors of Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis. So this I am showing you in a symptomatic form so that you can understand the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease. Then microglial activation and neuroinflammation are other two major factors which plays an important role in Alzheimer's disease pathogenesis. So ultimately, it leads to the loss of synapse and neurotransmission, and it leads to the different kind of Alzheimer's disease related pathogenesis. Here you can see this is kind of healthy brain, and during mild cognitive impairment, when pathogenesis just started, there is slight started degeneration of the neurons. But in case of advanced stage of Alzheimer's disease, the excessive degeneration of neurons is there in the Alzheimer's disease brain. So symptoms, I already told you that learning and memory impairment is a major symptoms in early stage of Alzheimer's disease, but at later stage, several other symptoms also comes like motor dysfunctions in Alzheimer's disease patients. So I already told you that existing drugs only provide the symptomatic relief. So whatever therapies are available in the market, they are mostly targeted on enhancing the acetylcholine level into the brain and for inhibition of amyloid beta formation. Our group is basically working on how we can enhance the brain self-repair mechanism. So how we can enhance the brain self-repair mechanism, that you know about the induced pluripotent stem cells. These induced pluripotent stem cells we can isolate from the patient fibroblast, and then using specific factors, Yamanaka factors, we can convert these somatic cells into iPSC cells, and then these iPSC we can differentiate into specific type of neurons or any specific type of cells we can convert by using specific growth factors, and then these neurons we can transplant directly into the brain for as a stem cell therapy or regenerative medicine. So stem cell therapy is an approach, but at later stage I will tell you what are the limitations with stem cell therapy. So there are two approaches using stem cell to repair the brain damage. One is exogenous, another one is endogenous. Exogenous approach is this, where we convert stem cells into a specific type of neurons and then take those neurons and transplant into the brain. But after a few days post transplantation, these transplanted stem cells or neurons, they die, because in neurons we have the hostile environment, we have the increased oxidative stress at the site of injection. So those transplanted stem cells or neurons, they cannot survive for longer duration and then they die, which ultimately result in reduced learning and memory. So this approach is not very much feasible. Transplanting stem cell is not very much feasible. So another approach is to enhance the brain self-repair mechanism by inducing the endogenous stem cells. So we now know specific cues by which we can guide endogenous neural stem cell to convert into a specific type of neurons. So endogenous neural stem cell targeting is a major factor for regenerative medicine in different kind of neurodegenerative diseases. So this is how neural degeneration takes place. One approach is transplantation of pluripotent stem cells, direct neural stem cell directly into the brain. So this approach is not very much feasible. And another approach is neuronal regeneration by targeting endogenous neural stem cells. So there are two major regions in the brain. One is hippocampus, and another one is subventricular zone, where neural stem cell population they reside. These neural stem cells, they have the ability that they can convert into specific types of neurons. So we can target these neural stem cells. So here neural transplantation mechanism is there, that dead nerve cells which are not producing any neurotransmitter, those are replaced with implanted neural stem cells, and then these implanted neural stem cells, they make synapses with the host neurons, and then they release the neurotransmitter, and then this neurotransmitter provides the recovery. But limitation, I already told you that low survival and limited ability of the transplanted tissue is a major factor. And similarly, ethical and legal issues are also involved in using fetus for stem cell transplantation. So we can enhance the neurogenesis process. Neurogenesis is a process of generation of new neurons in the brain, and it takes place throughout life. Earlier, it was thought that neurons they cannot regenerate, means only adult, only this newborn brain has the ability that they can regenerate the neurons. But now we know that even adult brain has the stem cells, and these stem cells, they have the ability to proliferate and then differentiate into a specific type of neurons. So this kind of ability is there, and these neural stem cells have the ability that they can self-renew. That means they can make their own copy, and after self-renewal or maintaining their copy, they can differentiate into a specific type of neurons like oligodendrocyte neurons and astrocytes. So these stem cells have the ability to convert into a specific type of cells. And here you can see that neural stem cell, they can be converted into the specific type of committed progenitors, and then they can be converted into the neurons, interneurons, oligodendrocyte, and other types of astrocytes. So this mechanism has a very much functional application that we can enhance the adult neurogenesis process. So this is a very specific target for regenerative medicine, that we can enhance the brain self-repair mechanism by targeting this process, adult neurogenesis. So this adult neurogenesis has a very promising approach in regenerative medicine in Alzheimer's disease. So now I will present some data related to our work in case of regenerative medicine. Now a little bit I will discuss about the drug repurposing approach. As you know that developing any therapeutic molecule or drug is a very time consuming, and it's very expensive also, because for developing new drug, you need to do target identification, then screening of molecule. Ultimately, you do the lead optimization, then you do the lots of pharmacokinetics and toxicokinetics studies. Then it goes to the different stages of clinical trials, and then it goes to the market. So it takes around $1 billion, and it takes around 10 to 20 years time. So through drug repurposing approach, we take those drugs which are already available in the market and which are being used for some different diseases, and we take those drugs and we can bypass this step like target identification, screening, molecule discovery, lead optimization, because drug is already available in the market. We do not need to do any kind of pharmacokinetic study, any toxicity related study. We can directly take those drugs. We do the screening in different models, and then we do the compound validation assay, and those drugs all can directly go to the clinical trials and then market. So we can save lots of money and time using this drug repurposing approach. So in our study also, we adopted an innovative drug repurposing approach for Alzheimer's disease to enhance the brain self-repair mechanism in animal model of Alzheimer's disease. And we took around 2,200 FDA-approved drugs which are already available in the market for different diseases. And on the basis of behavioral and transcriptomic model, we have screened those drugs. And so how we did this screening? First of all, we did the data mining through different search engines, and we identified drugs And then we did the behavioral and transcriptomic analysis, and we identified around 2200 drugs which are already available. We screened those drugs, and then we did the screening, and we found around 190 hits. And those 190 hits we screened in Drosophila model of Parkinson disease, and we saw the neuroactive potential of around 20 drugs. Means out of 190 drugs, there were 20 drugs which have some neuroactive potential, and then these 20 fly hits we have tested in vitro in the neural stem cell culture at proliferation and differentiation level. Then out of those 20 drugs, we identified 2 drugs which were having ability to enhance the capacity to neural stem cell proliferation and differentiation. Then we tested these 2 drugs in animal model of Alzheimer's disease, and now remaining work is under process, and hopefully it will go in clinical trial soon. So this is the overall genesis of the project. And here you can see that we screened around 20 drugs in vitro at neural stem cell proliferation and differentiation, and we selected only that drug which has the neural stem cell proliferation as well as neuronal differentiation enhancing ability, and similarly they were able to recover learning and memory impairment in Alzheimer's disease animal model. So here you can see ethosuximide is a drug which was able to enhance the neural stem cell proliferation and neuronal differentiation. And then ethosuximide is an anti-epileptic drug which is mainly commonly used for treatment of absence seizures in children, and it mainly acts by blocking T-type voltage gated calcium channels. And one study suggested that it also promotes neural differentiation of rat muscle stem cells in vitro, but whether it enhances the neurogenesis process or generation of new neurons, it was not known. So through our drug repurposing approach, we identified ethosuximide as a molecule, and then we studied its effect on neurogenesis or for targeting endogenous neural stem cells. So overall objective was to understand the effect of ethosuximide on adult neurogenesis and what mechanism is involved. So this work was published in Journal of Biological Chemistry, and where we found that ethosuximide has the ability to enhance stem cell proliferation and differentiation in rat model of Alzheimer's disease through PI3K AKT beta catenin pathway. So first of all, what we did, we isolated stem cells culture, neural stem cells. We cultured those stem cells in the petri dish, and then we, after few days, we found that neurosphere formation was there. Then we characterized those stem cells using specific type of markers like BRDU and nestin. We did the colocalization in order to make sure that whatever we are culturing, those are stem cells, not any kind of artifact. And then we differentiated those neural stem cells into a specific type of neurons, astrocyte. So here you can see neurons, those are beta tubulin linked, and then GFAP is green. Here you can see the astrocytes, and this is the co-leveled cell where both neurons and astrocytes are present. So that means these neural stem cells can be converted into all types of brain cells. And then what we did in those stem cell culture, neural stem cell culture, we treated with different concentration of ethosuximide, and we found that through BRDU, here you can see the control BRDU, and in ethosuximide treated culture, neural stem cell proliferation was significantly induced. So that means ethosuximide has the ability to enhance the neural stem cell proliferation in culture. So similarly, here you can see this is the neural stem cell colony, and in case of ethosuximide treated neural stem cell culture, the colony of neural stem cell was significantly bigger in size. Similarly, their number was also increased. It suggests that stem cell number was upregulated by ethosuximide treatment in culture. Then we treated orally ethosuximide to the animals. We given ethosuximide treatment to the rats, and after 4 weeks post treatment of ethosuximide, we sacrificed the animals, we took out the brain, and then we cut the sections of the brain. And as I said that in the hippocampus and subventricular zone regions, there are neural stem cell population. So here you can see in the brain sections, through immunohistochemistry technique, we identified that in case of control, there is significant less number of BRDO positive neural stem cells, but in ethosuximide treated animals, the neural stem cell number was significantly high. So that means ethosuximide also enhances the neural stem cell number into the hippocampus region of the rat brain. Similarly, the phosphoestrone 3 expression was also upregulated, which is a marker for neural stem cells, dividing neural stem cells, which suggests that yes, ethosuximide activates neural stem cell proliferation in the neurogenic brain regions. And after that, we made amyloid beta induced model of Alzheimer's disease. Here you can see this is the histiotaxic apparatus. And in that histiotaxic apparatus, we mounted the anesthetized animals. So these animals are under anesthesia. They cannot feel any kind of pain. And we made a small incision. And through histiotaxic coordinate, we can identify that where we are injecting our chemical. So this is the, here you can see the syringe, and we injected amyloid beta, which is a pathogenic protein which causes degeneration of the cholinergic neurons directly into the hippocampus region. So after 2 weeks post amyloid beta injection, we did the neurobehavioral analysis, and we found that in those amyloid beta lesioned animals, the learning and memory ability was reduced. So that means our animal model of Alzheimer's disease is prepared. And after that, we studied the stem cell proliferation in amyloid beta treated animals, and those animals were also treated with ethosuximide. And here you can see, as compared to the control animals, the number of neural stem cells, these green dots are neural stem cells which are labeled with BRDO, which is a marker for proliferating stem cell. And here you can see the number of stem cells is significantly reduced. But when we treated animals with ethosuximide, in that condition, green dots or neural stem cell population is significantly high in the hippocampus region. This is the hippocampus region, which mainly regulates the learning and memory ability. And similarly, ethosuximide treatment significantly protect amyloid beta mediated reduced stem cell proliferation. So that means ethosuximide activates neural stem cell proliferation into the hippocampus region of rat model of Alzheimer's disease. And then what is more important, that once stem cells they proliferate, they should differentiate into the neurons. If they will not differentiate into neurons, they will not able to make neurobehavioral recovery. So after stem cell proliferation, we studied effect of ethosuximide on neuronal differentiation. That means those stem cells, whether they are able to make new neurons or not. So for that, we studied co-labeling of BRDO with DCX. BRDO marker of proliferation, while DCX is a marker of neurons. And here you can see that cold-labeled neurons are cold-labeled cells are those cells which are undergoing in neuronal differentiation. And here we found that BRDO double coating positive cells was significantly down-regulated by amyloid beta treatment. But when we treated animals with ethosuximide, in that condition, the number of neurons was significantly upregulated. So that means those stem cells, they were having ability to differentiate into the neurons. After that, we studied expression of different genes which regulates the formation of new neurons. And similarly, here we found that amyloid beta reduces the expression of neurogenic genes, and then ethosuximide treatment significantly upregulates the expression of these genes. So that means ethosuximide is acting through enhancing the expression of neurogenic genes into the hippocampus region. And then this pathway is very, very important pathway, which is involved in regulation of neurogenesis process or generation of new neurons into the brain. So we studied how ethosuximide alters this pathway. And then we studied the expression of these genes by real-time PCR, and we found that amyloid beta significantly blocks this pathway. But when we treated animals with ethosuximide, in that condition, the expression of Wnt beta-catenin pathway genes was significantly upregulated. But our question was whether this pathway is specifically involved in activation of neurogenesis or not. For that, we inhibited this pathway using a specific inhibitor of this pathway like DKK1. And here you can see when we blocked this pathway using this protein DKK1, in that condition, the BRDU positive cells number, green fluorescent number, similarly, neuronal differentiation was also reduced. But when we treated Dow's culture with ethosuximide, in that condition, the ethosuximide significantly enhanced the stem cell proliferation and differentiation. This suggests the specific role of this pathway in ethosuximide mediated stem cell proliferation. After that, we did very interesting experiment where we blocked this pathway using beta-catenin siRNA. When we blocked beta-catenin through siRNA, in that condition, we found that the neuronal differentiation was reduced, and in case of ethosuximide, this neuronal differentiation was upregulated. So this pathway is specifically involved in neuroprotective action of ethosuximide. And then we found that this pathway also activates PI3-AKT. And this is the very important study where we studied effect of ethosuximide on learning and memory, because after stem cell proliferation and differentiation into neurons, they should be able to recover the learning and memory deficit. And here you can see that amyloid beta significantly reduced the learning and memory ability. This is the learning and this is the memory. So learning and memory both were reduced in animals by this amyloid beta. But when animals were treated with ethosuximide, in that condition, learning and memory was significantly restored in animal model of Alzheimer's disease. And after that, through in silico approach, we have also identified few possible targets, and we found that AKT1, DKK1, and GSK3 beta, which are component of Wnt beta-catenin pathway, those are the possible targets of ethosuximide, because ethosuximide goes directly into the binding cavity of these molecules and bind there, and then it exerts its action. So this is the overall representation of mechanism of ethosuximide. I will not go in detail. So our findings suggest that ethosuximide is able to enhance the stem cell proliferation and differentiation into the in vitro culture as well as in animals. And then we also did the test tube beta amyloid aggregation, and here you can see that amyloid beta has the tendency that it gets aggregates in test tube. So here you can see at 48 hours there is accumulation of amyloid beta aggregates in test tube. But when we treated amyloid beta along with ethosuximide, in that condition amyloid beta aggregation was prevented. So that means ethosuximide not only enhances the brain self-repair mechanism, but it also reduces the amyloid beta aggregation. So ethosuximide could be a potential target for enhancing brain self-repair mechanism into the hippocampus region, and it mainly works through activation of Wnt beta-catenin pathway, and it also recovers learning and memory deficit and red model of Alzheimer's disease. And then second aspect, our group is working on nanomedicine for brain diseases. This is also very upcoming field where nanomedicine is used for treatment of neurodegenerative diseases. So our group is mainly worked on how nanoparticles can be used for recovery of different neurobehavior aspect in Alzheimer's disease as well as in Parkinson's disease. So what is the major hurdle in treatment of neurodegenerative diseases? that therapeutic molecules, they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. There is barrier between whole body and then between the brain. And this blood-brain barrier has the ability that it protects entering several molecules into the brain. So it is kind of protective covering of our body. And in our study, we studied the effect of dopamine-loaded nanoparticles for therapeutic benefits in Parkinson's disease. So here you can see this is the blood-brain barrier, and blood-brain barrier is this is the barrier which only allow entry of water, oxygen, and glucose into the brain. Rest all molecules, they cannot get entered. So this is a major hurdles in Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease drug discovery, that whatever molecules are designed being high molecular weight, they cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, they cannot reach into the brain, and their ability is very less into the brain, so they can not exert neuroprotective action. So we in our study, we designed dopamine-loaded nanoparticles for functional deficit in Parkinson rats, and this work was published in ACS Nano with impact factor around 12.9. And Parkinson's disease is another neurodegenerative disease which is characterized by loss of dopamine producing neurons. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and this neurotransmitter regulates our body's movement. When there is any reduction in dopamine level, it leads to reduced motor deficits, or our muscles cannot move, or our body cannot move. So these are the major symptoms of Parkinson's disease. So in case of Parkinson's disease, there is loss of dopamine producing neurons into the midbrain region, and alpha-synuclein accumulation is the major hallmark of this disease. Similarly to the Alzheimer's disease, in case of Parkinson's disease also, existing drugs, they only provide the symptomatic relief, and they cannot halt or slow down the progression of the disease. So existing drug is levodopa. Levodopa is a drug when we take orally. This drug can cross the blood-brain barrier. It can reach into the brain, and then it converts into the dopamine. But the major limitation of levodopa is that after several years, it tends to decrease its efficacy. It is not efficacious after few years of treatment. And then chronic treatment also associated with several side effects, because in case of levodopa, there is on and off phenomenon. So now question comes, why we cannot directly give dopamine itself to the patient? And the answer is because dopamine cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, because being a high molecular weight, it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. And then in peripheral system, it gets metabolized very quickly. So even very less amount of dopamine is reaching into the brain. Its bioavailability is very less because it gets mainly metabolized into the peripheral system. So in our study, we made PLGA encapsulated dopamine nanoparticles. And what is the advantage of using PLGA? Because these nanoparticles, they can easily cross the blood-brain barrier because their size is in nanometer range, and they can cross the blood-brain barrier, and these nanoparticles are biodegradable in nature. They cannot accumulate in the body for longer duration, and then they also exhibit sustained and slow release. We can design such nanoparticles, and we can modify them in such a manner that they can release our target drug in a very slow and sustained manner, and it leads to increased bioavailability in the brain. And because the drug is coming very slowly in the peripheral system also, so decreased metabolism of that compound is there. So here you can see we made the PLGA encapsulated dopamine nanoparticles. So this is the PLGA, and then dopamine is encapsulated inside those nanoparticles. And through scanning electron microscopy and transmission electron microscopy, we categorize those nanoparticles. And here you can see very beautiful, round, small PLGA dopamine nanoparticles. And then we did the drug release experiment. We found that those nanoparticles were able to constantly and slowly release dopamine for even for 160 hours. So those were able to very slowly and constantly release dopamine in test tube. And after that, we did the culture of dopaminergic neurons, and we treated those neurons with dopamine nanoparticles. And these nanoparticles, they were tagged with FITC. FITC is a fluorescence molecules. So those nanoparticles were tagged with this fluorescence molecule. And here you can see these yellow dots are PLGA tagged FITC nanoparticles, and dopamine is encapsulated in those nanoparticles. And here you can see 4 hours and 24 hours, their internalization was significantly high. And then through transmission transmission electron microscopy also, we identified that their accumulation is there inside the cells. So that means they internalize into the cell. And similarly, through flow cytometry also, we found the cellular internalization of dopamine nanoparticles. And then this is a major study because dopamine causes the cytotoxicity, but when we treated cells with dopamine nanoparticles, in that condition, dopamine nanoparticles do not cause cytotoxicity because dopamine is coming out from the dopamine nanoparticles very slowly and constantly. So whatever dopamine is available, it is being used by the cell, and then, hence it is not causing the cytotoxicity. So these nanoparticles, they are safe. And then similarly, through different analysis, we found that dopamine nanoparticles, they do not cause apoptosis also. So that means those nanoparticles are very safe. And after that, we injected these nanoparticles through intravenous route in animals, in the rat model of Parkinson disease. And through immunohistochemistry approach, we cut the brain sections, and we found that dopamine nanoparticles, they cross the blood-brain barrier and they reach into the brain. And here you can see the green small dots. Those are the dopamine nanoparticles which are present into the midbrain regions as well as other region of the brain. So they have the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. And here also you can see this is the accumulation of different nanoparticles into the brain. And we did the characterization of these nanoparticles. And after reaching into the brain, these nanoparticles constantly and slowly release the dopamine neurotransmitter in the brain. And through SPLC analysis, we identified that these nanoparticles increase the dopamine levels, neurotransmitter level in the brain. So that means they were able to reach, not only reach to the brain, but they also caused the increased dopamine levels into animal model of Parkinson disease. And then we made the animal model of Parkinson disease, and we treated those animals with these dopamine nanoparticles. And after 4 weeks post injection, we measured the locomotor activity. So this is the instrument which monitors the spontaneous locomotor activity of animal. When we, in case of a Parkinson disease model, the locomotor activity was significantly down-regulated as compared to the control animals. But dopamine nanoparticles treated animals, they have the significantly up-regulated locomotor activity. So that means these nanoparticles have the ability to reach into the brain, to release the dopamine at the site, and then also recover the locomotor activity deficit in animal model of Parkinson disease. And then ultimately dopamine nanoparticles, they do not cause any kind of dopaminergic neurodegeneration, rather they protect existing neurons from neurodegeneration. And then these nanoparticles do not cause any kind of cardiotoxicity because dopamine is known to enhance the blood pressure and cause the cardiotoxicity. But in our case, since dopamine is coming from nanoparticles very slowly and constantly, that's why it was not able to induce any kind of cardiotoxicity or increased blood pressure. So dopamine nanoparticles, reverse functional deficit in rat model of Parkinson disease. And then this study was published in ACS Nano, and there was several magazines which covered this article. And here you can see that new drug is developed for Parkinson disease, nanoparticle drugs. So now work is in progress. We are making different kind of formulations. We are also making nanoparticles for levodopa to enhance the locomotor deficits in Parkinson model. And then here you can see new nanoparticle treatment aims to reverse Parkinson disease-like symptoms in animal model of Parkinson disease. Similarly, this was also covered by ACS magazine. And then in second aspect, we covered curcumin. We made curcumin nanoparticles because you know that curcumin is a polyphenol, and its neuroprotective action is very well established. But again, what is the problem with curcumin? That it can not cross blood-brain barrier in sufficient amount. Its viability is very less in the brain. And so in order to enhance the brain viability, we make curcumin loaded PLGN nanoparticles. And here you can see that curcumin acts through different routes, and it exerts its neuroprotective role in several neurodegenerative diseases and neurological disorders like Alzheimer, Parkinson, epilepsy, depression, schizophrenia. So literature is flooded with study with curcumin, which suggested that curcumin has a very strong neuroprotective role. But again, viability of curcumin is a major factor. So due to that, bulk curcumin is very less insoluble in water at physical pH, and then its limited absorption is a major problem. Similarly, curcumin also get metabolized in peripheral system, and its enhanced excretion is also responsible for its low viability. So in order to enhance the brain viability, we made curcumin encapsulated PLGA nanoparticles, and similarly, and then we studied its effect on neurogenesis, because this effect was not studied yet, and we found that curcumin has the ability to enhance the brain self-repair mechanism. So similarly, this work was also published in ACS Nano with impact factor this much, and the title is curcumin loaded nanoparticles potently induce adult neurogenesis and reverse cognitive deficit in Alzheimer's disease model via canonical beta-catenin pathway. Similarly, this work was also very much covered by different magazines, so it was a big news that time. And then here we did the characterization of curcumin nanoparticles. So this is the bulk curcumin, normal curcumin, and these are the curcumin encapsulated PLJ nanoparticle. And here you can see the round curcumin nanoparticles. So this is the size of curcumin nanoparticles. And then through transmission electron microscopy also we identified its size. We did the entrapment efficiency, which was very much high. And then we also measured the zeta potential of that. And then we did the in vitro curcumin release study similar to dopamine also. Here we found that curcumin nanoparticles was also able to constantly slowly release curcumin in test tube. So we found around 160 hours, and then it is slowly releasing curcumin. And here we established the primary stem cell culture. And then similarly here also we found that FITC PLGA tagged nanoparticles, they were present into the cells. So here you can see that this is the neurosphere, which is the accumulation of several neural stem cells. And through flow cytometry analysis, we found that curcumin PLGA nanoparticles, which are fluorescent tagged, were internalized into the cells. And this is very interesting image. At left side, you can see this is the low magnification image of neuron. And here you can see the cell membrane. Then you can see the nucleus and nucleolus. And this is the high magnification image, right hand side. And here you can see small dots. These are the nanoparticles. Even those nanoparticles, they were present near to the nuclear pore, they were present into the cytoplasm, they were present near to the mitochondria. So after reaching into the cells, they release their payload, that is curcumin, in the cell, and then they do the neuroprotective action. And here we did the comparative analysis of bulk curcumin, which is a native curcumin, and then curcumin encapsulated nanoparticles. And we found that curcumin encapsulated PLGA nanoparticles significantly upregulated stem cell proliferation as compared to the bulk curcumin. For in case of bulk curcumin, we required high quantity of curcumin, but for curcumin PLGA nanoparticles, we required very less amount of nanoparticles, because these nanoparticles, they are slowly releasing curcumin in the culture or in the cell constantly, and they are doing their function. So they enhance the stem cell proliferation more effectively as compared to the bulk curcumin. So here you can see that bulk curcumin was able to enhance the stem cell proliferation at higher concentration, that is 0.5 micromolar, but curcumin nanoparticles, they significantly increased stem cell proliferation even at very less concentration, 0.01 micromolar. So around 50-fold dose advantage is already there. And then we treated those curcumin nanoparticles to the animals. We given those nanoparticles orally to the animals, and these nanoparticles, they reached into the brain. So this is the green fluorescence is the nanoparticle, and here you can see they are present throughout the brain. Small dots are the curcumin PLGA nanoparticles. They are present into the hippocampus region and the subventricular zone regions. So these are the two zones which are affected into the Alzheimer's disease. So these nanoparticles are present into the hippocampus region. And here you can see that curcumin PLGA nanoparticles significantly upregulated the stem cell proliferation as compared to the bulk curcumin. And then they also increase the stem cell proliferation and then neuronal differentiation. And here you can see that curcumin PLGA nanoparticles significantly upregulated the stem cell proliferation and neuronal differentiation as compared to the bulk curcumin. And they also, not only they enhance the neurogenesis process, but they also reduce the cognitive deficit in Alzheimer's disease model. And we found around 40-fold dose advantage. In case of bulk curcumin, we got around 40-fold dose advantage. Like in case of curcumin PLGA nanoparticles, that curcumin PLGA nanoparticles was able to enhance the learning and memory recovery in Alzheimer's disease model, and that recovery was very much high as compared to the bulk curcumin. So very less amount of PLGA encapsulated nanoparticle is required as compared to bulk curcumin. So it also protects curcumin mediated neurotoxicity in animal model of Alzheimer's disease. So nanotized curcumin potently induced neurogenesis as compared to the bulk curcumin. So overall summary of this talk is that ethosuximide is a major therapeutic target, or it is a therapeutic drug which can be used for drug repurposing, and we are now making different analogs in order to further enhance ethosuximide's availability or its efficacy. So we are making different analogs, and then we are trying those analogs in animal model of Alzheimer's disease. So this can be a very good approach for Alzheimer's disease treatment. And then second aspect is that dopamine encapsulated nanoparticle could be therapeutic approach for Parkinson's disease. So more studies are needed for this. And then curcumin encapsulated nanoparticles also recovers learning and memory deficits in Alzheimer's disease model. So this is all. So at last, I would like to acknowledge my former directors and my students, Dr. Sasikant Dr. Sasikant, he is in USA, doctor in University of California. Dr. Swati Agrawal, she is in John Hopkins University, USA. Dr. Bresket Shed, Dr. Anwada, they are also faculty. And Dr. Selin Kumar Gupta, he is faculty in Germany. And then we have funding source from different funding agency. So thank you so much for your kind hearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor, for your enlightening presentation of neurodegenerative disease. So we already learned about STEM therapy. We learned about nanoparticles and repurposing a drug like ethosuximide, how it can be used to treat neurodegenerative diseases. So I open the floor for questions. So you can ask questions or you can put in the chat box.
I have a question to Dr. Rajneesh. Dr. Rajneesh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate for such a nice presentation in a short span of time. You explained a vast view, of your research, including all sort of nanomedicine, including all sort of nanoparticles, which are maybe in coming future, they can help for humanity as well as for mankind. Now, few of the questions, I have some understanding. I was trying to grasp most of the, because it's too much, extensive work, So as far as dopamine and nanoparticle, doctor, this, the human trials, how much difficulty you face for human trials? I mean, after animal models, we need to use for clinical phases in human trials. And difficulty for bureaucracy if you face, because it's you are already in a senior positions in CSIR in India and all over the world, and how much these nanoparticles is there any work done for human trials? And maybe the work is going on, I'm not sure, I don't have much idea on it. And how much use can be, like, as you said, the bioavailability and sustainability in those cells when passing through the blood-brain barrier is very nice and is quite sufficient enough and is sustainable. So this will work. I mean, it's going on. So what is your opinion? Maybe you can put some insight on it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Karthikeya. It's a very nice question and a very good observation also. So here I would like to mention that this is very upcoming field, and most of the studies are still in experimental condition. And as I mentioned regarding the dopamine nanoparticles, so even our lab also, we are now trying to identify whether there is accumulation of these nanoparticles in other non-target organs, because brain is target organ, but if those nanoparticles are present in some other organs, we do not know what they are doing there. So those kind of studies are going on, whether they are those after reaching different organs, they are causing any kind of toxicity or not. So these studies we are doing. And as far as PLGN nanoparticles are concerned, these nanoparticles are already approved by FDA, US FDA, for biomedical applications. So once this kind of studies are over, that these nanoparticles are not having any kind of accumulation in non-target organs. So I'm hopeful that it can go in clinical trials. But before reaching that, lots of studies are needed for their functional validation, whether they are reaching into other kind of organs or not.
Thank you, doctor, for your explanation. And any idea about the route of administration? Can we be put in like this way only, like blood-brain barrier pass through by orally, or injecting intravenously? Perhaps you mentioned, like,
yeah.
So the same way we can put for humans also, like just like intravenously injection way. Like, is it the same? Maybe work is in progress or something.
Yeah. So in our study for dopamine nanoparticles, we used intravenous route, but that is not route of choice for clinical setup. Okay, because it is very invasive. We cannot give nanoparticles to intravenous route to the patient. So now we are making such kind of nanoparticles which can sustain this our gastric juices pH. Because what is the problem when we take PLJ nanoparticles? They can
Degrade, I
get
think.
metabolized, they can get degraded.
Okay,
So
okay.
now we are making such kind of nanoparticles which can sustain the gastric pH. And in case of our Parkinson disease dopamine nanoparticle, we give through intravenous route, but for curcumin, we gave oral route. And we made different kind of nanoparticles. We used Utrajet coating, so that coating prevents those nanoparticles from degradation. And so major route should be oral, means we cannot give through intravenous route. So our studies are now mainly focused to make or formulate such kind of nanoparticles which can go directly to the brain, specific targeting by receptor antibody. So we are now making those nanoparticles, and we are tagging those nanoparticles with receptor antibody, which are highly expressed into the brain region, and they can easily cross the this gastric route, and it can reach to the brain.
Thank you, Dr. Rajneesh, for such a nice presentation. You explained quite very nicely, and extensive work is there. Actually, it's in a short span of time we could not understand all the work which has been completed by all your team and your CSIR laboratory. I appreciate your efforts, and from bottom of my heart, the MSU as well as our friend Dr. Kiran and Dr. Rasni and other faculty members, perhaps. I would like to congratulate on behalf of them. Maybe he wants to congratulate, but I congratulate beforehand. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor. Any other questions? Is open to the students also. Students can ask. No need to be shy, students.
I have a question. Can I ask, Mr. Kiran?
Yeah, can
All right. Okay, thank you, Dr. Rajneesh. Okay, sorry, I was a bit late because I had another meeting. It was very interesting, and I just have a simple question. Is there any fluorescent dyes have you incorporate with the formulation to ensure the release of the drug can be seen clearly?
Yes, so in our case we used FITC. This is just a fluorophore, and it is commercially available, and it is very simple protocol. You can adopt that protocol, and then those nanoparticles, they can give the fluorescence. You can even use two kind of FITC, TRITC. You can label different nanoparticles with different fluorophore. So those are already available in the market, and it is very easy protocol also for labeling.
Do you need to freshly prepare the solution, or everything?
Yes, freshly prepared. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Rasni. Any others have questions? Students can ask. We have. Okay, so if I think anyone can ask, we still open for the discussion. And yeah. Okay, so you can put in the chat box. If you are shy to ask, you can put in the chat box your question. It may be a simple question. You can ask.
Yeah, you can ask any question. Yeah, any question is welcome. Please.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
My name is Noreen from BPH Year 3. So my question is like, how nanoparticle does leave our body? The second question is, does nanoparticle will affect our DNA?
Yes, so I could not understand your first question, but second, yeah, please can
The
you
first
repeat?
question, how do nanoparticle leave our body? How the elimination process will be okay?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, so in this case, we are using PLGA as a material. So PLGA is easily able to biodegrade in our body when these nanoparticles reach into the different kind of organs. There they convert, because its full name is polylactic galactic acid. So those are made of two amino acid, lactic acid as well as galactic acid. So these two amino acids are component of Krebs cycle. After their degradation, these amino acids being used for Krebs cycle. Okay, and these nanoparticles are biodegradable, so their accumulation does not take place in the body. So that aspect is clear. So those nanoparticles are completely safe. And what was your second question, please?
The second question was like, does this nanoparticles will affect our DNA in future generation?
No, because these nanoparticles are not metallic nanoparticles. Those are simply biodegradable nanoparticles. They will not integrate into your genome. So neither they get integrate into the DNA or nor they cause any kind of DNA damage. So because I showed you data that these nanoparticles do not cause any kind of apoptosis as well. So those are safe.
Yeah.
So I think we have one question in chat box. So according to your talk, the ethosuximide and curcumin nanoparticles has neurodegenerative action, while dopamine nanoparticles only have neuroprotective action. Okay. Yeah. So for ethosuximide, we did not make nanoparticles, but for curcumin, yes, we made nanoparticles because curcumin bioavailability is a problem. But yes, ethosuximide and curcumin, they can enhance brain cell repair mechanism by targeting stem cells, neural stem cells. They can regenerate neurons. But as you know that dopamine action is very well established. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It do not enhance the brain cell repair mechanism, but it just recovers the locomotor activity deficit in animal model of Parkinson disease. So this is the mechanism. So those are the entirely different mechanisms.
Okay. So any other questions? Yes, anyone want to ask question, please scan.
Yeah, you can ask in chat box also, no problem.
Yeah, sometimes they are hesitate to ask.
Yeah, it's
So
always good that
chat box they
students
can
ask
put
the
up.
question. It's
You
always
can write question in the chat box. The students can do that.
most welcome. It's really very heartening that students, whenever they ask question, I like that very much.
Yes, students, please ask questions.
And I'm also pleased to see that so many Indian faces are here. So many students from India is also here.
Indians are all over the world.
Yeah.
More in USA than here in Malaysia.
Yeah, I think we don't have any questions, but okay. So anything you can already doctor has okay, or drop his email. Okay, you can ask, you can contact him. And I'm very thankful to Dr. Rajneesh. It was a very good talk, and I think there's one question here. Doctor, there's one question. Dopamine cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, but dopamine in nanoparticles can cross BBB.
Yes, because dopamine molecular weight high, so that's why it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. But when we make nanoparticles and encapsulate dopamine in it, then in that condition, the size of those nanoparticles, it is in nanometer range. So due to that, it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier, but dopamine itself cannot cross. So that is the major problem with Parkinson's disease therapy.
So Dr. Rajni, our blood-brain barrier is selectively permeable membrane. It means small pore size molecules can pass through, correct? Am I correct?
Yes. That's why glucose, oxygen, some kind of amino
Nanoscale minor.
Yeah, some kind of amino acid, even few drugs, they can also cross blood-brain barrier, like levodopa, it can cross blood-brain barrier.
Thank you, Dr. Rajni.
So any other questions you can put in the chat box. Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. We learned how you did your research and how you published in high impact journal. And my question, I have some questions, but what is what model rat model used for Alzheimer disease?
Yes, so for Alzheimer's disease, there are two kind of models. One is transgenic. So you have genetic mutation like amyloid beta mutation, presenilin 1 mutation, tau mutation. So those are transgenic model. And then another one is amyloid beta induced model of Alzheimer's disease, where we histiotoxically inject amyloid beta directly into the specific brain region, like in cortex or in hippocampus region. So through histiotoxic coordinate, when we inject amyloid beta, so in that condition, this amyloid beta, it causes the degeneration of acetylcholine producing cholinergic neurons. And after few weeks post injection of amyloid beta, we assess the learning and memory impairment using a specific instrument. And through that instrument, we know that yes, learning and memory impairment is there. And then we select only those animals where learning and memory impairment is there. So this is amyloid beta induced model of Alzheimer's disease.
Doctor, thank you. Thank you very much. I think you can still have maybe a few minutes. So you have any questions, others, students can ask questions. Otherwise, we can end our session. Any other questions, please ask. We have some more minutes, 5 minutes more.
I have shared my email address as well. If somebody has any kind of question, they can ask on my email as well. No problem. I will be more than happy to answer.
Okay, I think we don't have any further questions, and we will contact you. I think students can easily contact doctor. And I'm thankful and very good presentation, and we learned a lot from this lecture. So how we can repurpose drug as well as nanoparticles as a drug delivery system. Nowadays, we have everything we are making into nanoparticles, and so that is the future. And so we are very thankful to Dr. Rajneesh Chaturvedi, and from all behalf of School of Pharmacy and our students. So I thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Rajneesh, once again. Such a nice presentation. Keep it up. Keep the spirit high.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karthikeya. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Mr. Kiran. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Namaskar.
I think before that, okay, I think we take a picture. I forgot to take a group picture.
Yeah.
I don't think a student will come in the video
yeah,
mode.
Students, I think.
Can they come through camera mode?
Yeah, can. I think please for a while for taking picture, please switch on your camera, everyone. Yes, I can see here. Okay. Okay, some more. I can see only a few. For a while only, you can on the camera for a while. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining our talk. Okay, so I think I take the picture. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, next screen. Okay, I think nobody here. I think another one. Okay, one more. Okay, another one. Okay. Okay, thank you everyone for listening our talk and joining our talk. And thank you, Dr. Rajneesh Chaturvedi, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You can share this photograph with me also.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sure, Doctor. Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Bye. Ni murung